Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bimmer Barn. In today's episode, we're going to be working on the 550i M Sport, and more specifically, we're going to be servicing some of the things that are currently broken and leaking on the motor. So we have an oil pressure switch to do, a radiator hose, and also a vacuum pump seal and a CCV hose, which I'm hoping is going to fix that annoying screeching noise from the motor. Oh my God, I'm having flashbacks now. But anyways, this is just one step to getting the car running and driving. That way I can put a little more miles on the car and determine what other service it needs before we eventually put it for sale. So if you enjoy this sort of content, be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new and you haven't yet. And without further ado, let's get straight to work. Like I said, we have a few things to be changing today. The radiator stuff, this CCV hose, which I know is broken on the car right now, the hood struts, which are actually where we're gonna start. And then we have two oil leaks. I believe one is coming from the vacuum pump, but we definitely have a big leak coming from this oil pressure switch. So we're gonna go ahead and service that today, and I'm gonna show you guys in detail how we do that, because the N62 motor honestly is not that bad to service, besides a couple of places where it can be a little tight. So let's go ahead and jump over to the car, replace the hood struts, and then get to work on the rest of the motor. These hood struts are a piece of cake to replace, by the way. You just go ahead and pry the clip on the back of them with a flathead screwdriver and then use a little bit of momentum with your hand and it should be able to snap right off. Throw the new ones on there and now you don't have to worry about banging your head on the hood when you're working on your car. So now we're gonna go ahead and start removing the vacuum pump, and to get access to it, I'm just gonna go ahead and remove these coolant lines up top, and that way you guys can see the pump better. And then we're gonna have to remove the coolant line that's in front of the vacuum pump, and that's held on by a 10mm nut. So we're gonna go ahead, break that free, remove it, and that'll loosen up the coolant line. And then the vacuum pump itself is held in by 3 E8 socket bolts, and those are going to be pretty easy to get with an extension, and once you got all 3 of those off, the vacuum pump itself is going to come out. There is also a hose clamp holding the vacuum line on, so I'm going to go ahead and use a 1/4 inch socket to loosen that, and then we'll pop the line off and get the pump out. Now the real reason I took the vacuum pump off was because I wanted to get better access to the oil pressure switch, which is right beneath it. And this is held on by a 24mm socket. We're gonna go ahead and break it loose and remove it because I'm 100% certain that this is the cause of the oil leak that we have on this side of the motor. How do I know? Well, I had the same issue on my old 545i, which had the same N62 motor, and it seems to be a common issue. So we're gonna go ahead and replace this, and that should solve our oil leak issue. Now here we're replacing the O-ring for the vacuum pump, and what I noticed while trying to get the old one out was that there was already some factory extra sealant around it. So it looked like from factory it was kind of installed with some additional sealant. So that's what we're going to go ahead and replicate here, except with some red RTV. It shouldn't make a big difference because this is high temp RTV, but we're going to basically lay it in the channel here and then install our vacuum O-ring on top of that. So now we're going to be replacing the upper radiator hose, which I found to be leaking, and in order to give you guys a better view and give myself better access, I'm going to go ahead and remove this intake pipe here. You can see that the factory hose is very brown, and that's just a sign of the age of it, and that's why it started leaking. So it's got a few different clips because this is an automatic transmission car, a little bit tricky to get it wiggled out, but once we do have it out, we see just how bad it is, and then we can start installing the new one. Speaking of cooling system, I also noticed the expansion tank cap was in horrible condition, so I bought a new one, and you can see just the difference here with the new one compared to the old one. Now the last thing for us to change is going to be the PCV vent pipe, which is here right on top of the intake manifold. It's held in by a couple of squeeze clamps, and once you get all those loose, you can go ahead and pull it off. We're going to be replacing it with a new one today because the old one was in such bad condition it looked like it was leaking oil out the side of it. So we're going to throw that on the car, and then we'll start getting this motor ready to start and drive around. So that wasn't too difficult. We've got everything installed that we meant to install today, and I hope that this squealing noise goes away. Although we replaced that PCV hose that goes along the top of the motor, there are these, I think they're called CCV valves that go on each of the valve covers, and they're these little orange pucks. They have like a diaphragm to them, and they're supposed to regulate the internal pressure in the valve covers. Those could be failed as well. They'll also cause oil smoking out of the exhaust issues if they have failed. I think I have some extra ones actually down in my box that are good for my old 545i. But let's go ahead and try to start the motor for now, and then we'll see if those need to be installed. Topped off the coolant a little bit as well, and check the car to see if it has any more active coolant leaks or oil leaks, and just give it a drive and see how it goes. Alright, well the car is idling good, and looking from underneath, I don't see any active leaks, although it is still really dirty under there. So what I think I'm going to do now, before we actually drive it, is I'm going to pressure wash the underside to get all that oil out so we can keep track of any new leaks. And then I want to do a brake flush because the pedal goes down to the floor right now and it really doesn't brake as hard as it should. And I think that's because of the fluid. So we're going to go ahead and do a brake flush and pressure wash the underside of the car just to clean things up. And then we will finally take it for a real test drive. Now to do the brake flush, we're going to have to get access to the brake fluid reservoir, which is here on the driver's side of the car and underneath the cabin filter housing assembly. So a couple of screws and clips to get that loose, and then we're going to go ahead and use the Schwaben universal brake fluid bleeder system to pump all the old fluid out and through one of the calipers on the car. And I wanted to show you guys just how bad the color was of the fluid and what you can do when you have a potential clog in the system. here I'm breaking loose the bleeder nipple, but I'm seeing that not any fluid is coming out. So I'm gonna go ahead and step inside of the car and press down on the brake pedal, and that's gonna force out all this fluid, and it's gonna help us bleed the system. Now, even with those 2 pumps of the pedal, it still seems to be a little bit clogged and it's not draining the fluid as fast as it should be. So let's go ahead and try it again. And now for the grand finale, I'm gonna make all this oil and grease disappear. All right, so we're on our first real test drive after fixing all those things on the car. Basically just the minimum required maintenance, we'll call it, to get this thing drivable, in my opinion. There's definitely more things I think that could be addressed on this car, but it's just gonna come down to a matter of time on this car, because I would love to address everything, but obviously time is the limiting factor. So we'll probably do some of the heavy hitters if we can, and we'll focus on those because they'll give us the most resale value when we go to sell it and we say that, hey, you know, the alternator bracket has been done before. That's a 16-hour job, so the car is worth a little bit more because all that labor was put into it. Now, after doing that brake flush, I will say that the brakes still feel a little bit spongy. Maybe I need to do like the DSC bleeding procedure, which is, you know, through the laptop, it would connect to the ABS unit and it would force pump the fluid out of it, make sure there are no air bubbles in it. Otherwise, the car drives great. It's got a little bit of an alignment issue. Looks like the steering wheel points a little bit to the right, even though the car drives straight. And sounds good, you know, it's really comfortable in here. So far, so good. You know, the car isn't throwing any massive surprises for us. Now, I may have spoken a little bit too quick here because it looks like we've got an engine oil level fault code. Now, since I did do an oil level reading before we left the house, it did look like we had 2 bars left, but now it's saying that we're below the minimum level. So this could just be the car rereading for the first time and getting that oil level measurement correct. I don't think that it has any big oil leaks. I mean, from what I saw underneath the car, it didn't look like it. So let's go ahead and hop back to the garage and probably add a little bit of oil, and then we'll do some more driving later. So that's going to conclude our video for today, folks, and I hope you enjoyed watching. The 550i has definitely thrown a curveball for us, giving us that oil level light, but I think it's just because the oil level was probably low when we changed those gaskets, and now we need to top it off a little bit more. I don't think we have any active oil leaks, but we're going to find out because I've got the car parked in the garage, and we're going to keep a close eye on it as we start to rack up some miles on it before we list it for sale. In the next videos, we're probably going to be focusing back on the 335i wagon because I am so close to getting that thing running on all 4 wheels, and I cannot wait to show you guys the end result with all the mods, with all the maintenance that we've done to it, and we still have plenty more to do on the car as well. So if you enjoy these sort of videos, be sure to leave a like or a comment down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you haven't yet, and as always, I hope everyone has an amazing year. Happy New Year, guys. We'll see you in the next video.